A sudden spotlight has trained itself on the dynamics within the Turning Point USA. Kirk family sag, and in the center of it all is Joe Rogan speaking out in ways no one expected. With the tragic death of Charlie Kirk still fresh in public memory, Rogan has injected his own voice into the unfolding story of Erika Kirk's role, her relationship with the Kirk family, and the future of the organization Charlie founded. In a recent podcast segment, Rogan raised pointed questions about the shift in power, the role Erika is playing, and what the family circle is really thinking behind closed doors. Multiple sources say his tone was less conspiratorial and more an appeal to transparency. Why did Erika rise so quickly? How aligned is she with Charlie's parents? And what happens when a beloved movement loses its charismatic founder? Online, fans and critics exploded, some applauding Rogan for asking the hard questions, others accusing him of stirring drama. The Kirk family has remained largely silent on Rogan's remarks, leaving a vacuum filled by speculation, memes, and what really happened threads. But for viewers and followers of conservative politics alike, this isn't just celebrity gossip, it's a test of legacy, loyalty, and how quickly power can change hands in the spotlight. As Rogan's comments ripple across media channels, the whispers have turned into headlines. And now the pressing question faces everyone involved. Will the truth come out, or will it be packaged as another narrative for the masses? When Joe Rogan speaks, the world listens. And this time, his words sent shockwaves through both the entertainment world and the political sphere. In a recent episode of his wildly popular podcast, Rogan broke his silence about Erika Kirk, the widow of the late political figure Charlie Kirk, and her complicated relationship with Charlie's family following his death. What was meant to be a heartfelt commentary about legacy and loyalty quickly turned into one of the most talked about discussions of the year. Rogan began by expressing respect for Charlie Kirk's legacy, calling him a driven and polarizing figure who reshaped conservative youth politics. But it wasn't long before he turned his attention toward Erika, raising questions that no one else in the media seemed willing to ask. "I'm not saying she's done anything wrong," Rogan said. "I'm just saying something doesn't feel right about how fast everything's moving." His words were measured but deliberate, and the moment he spoke them, the internet erupted to understand why Rogan's comments carried such weight. You have to understand the dynamic between Erika and the Kirk family. After Charlie's death, Erika stepped into his role as the face and voice of his organization. Many supporters viewed her as a natural successor, strong, articulate, and dedicated to continuing her husband's mission. But others whispered about power, influence, and whether her sudden rise was too quick, too strategic, and too controlled. Within the Kirk family, those questions reportedly caused division. Some relatives supported her fully, while others worried that the organization was becoming less about Charlie's legacy and more about Erika's image. Rogan's remarks hit a nerve because they voiced what many had been thinking but were too afraid to say. In his calm but critical tone, he questioned whether grief and ambition had become intertwined. Losing someone that close, then immediately stepping into their shoes, that's not normal, he said. You don't have time to process. You don't have time to heal. And when there's money and influence involved, emotions get messy. It wasn't an accusation, but it was sharp enough to draw blood. Within hours, clips from the episode went viral. Fans debated Rogan's intent. Was he defending Charlie's family or just stirring controversy? On social media, opinions were split. Some applauded him for asking uncomfortable questions, while others accused him of exploiting a tragedy. The hashtags started trending. #RoganSpeaks, #ErikaKirk, and #KirkFamilyDrama. Inside conservative circles, the situation grew even more delicate. Erika had spent months rebuilding her husband's platform, securing media appearances, and aligning with political partners who promised to honor his vision. Her leadership style was ambitious and assertive, but not everyone was comfortable with it. According to several insiders, some longtime allies of Charlie felt pushed aside, while others saw Erika as the only person capable of maintaining the movement's energy. Rogan's public commentary, intentional or not, forced those quiet tensions into the spotlight. Meanwhile, Erika herself maintains silence. She didn't respond publicly to Rogan's comments, choosing instead to stay focused on her projects and public appearances. Those close to her said she viewed the criticism as distractions from the mission. Still, her silence was interpreted in many ways. To some, it signaled composure. To others, guilt. Every word unspoken became part of the narrative. Behind the scenes, Charlie's family reportedly felt torn. They loved Erika, but struggled to accept how quickly she'd taken control of the organization. One relative was quoted as saying, "We're proud of her, but it feels like we lost Charlie twice, once to tragedy and again to the spotlight." Rogan's remarks only deepened that wound, for a family still processing grief. Hearing a global figure analyze their private pain was salt in the wound. But for Rogan, this was bigger than gossip. His commentary reflected a pattern he's often pointed out on his show: how fame and influence distort relationships. "Power changes people," he said. "Sometimes it makes them better. Sometimes it breaks them." The question is, does Erika know which side she's on? It was the kind of comment that turned a conversation into a movement. People began creating long threads, dissecting her every move, from her interviews to her social media captions, searching for hidden motives or inconsistencies. In a way, Rogan's words didn't just spark controversy. They created a cultural moment. It was no longer about one woman or one family. It became a reflection of how the public consumes tragedy. Fans didn't just want to grieve. They wanted to analyze, debate, and pick sides. The media cycle turned Erika into both a hero and a suspect, depending on who you asked. As the debate intensified, other commentators began to weigh in. Some defended Rogan, calling his approach fair questioning. Others argued he crossed a line by inserting himself into a family's private struggles. One journalist summed it up perfectly. "Joe Rogan didn't break the story, he legitimized it. When he speaks, people start believing there's something more to the tale." The aftermath also exposed a deeper truth about public life. When you live in the spotlight, there's no such thing as privacy. Erika Kirk had married a man who thrived on media attention. And now she was living through the downside of it. Every decision, every expression, every silence was under scrutiny. The Kirk family, once united under Charlie's leadership, was now being publicly dissected by strangers who claimed to know their motives better than they did themselves. By the end of that week, Rogan's episode had racked up millions of views. Clips of his key quotes flooded every platform. Analysts on both the political right and left weighed in, each twisting the conversation to fit their agendas. Yet through all the noise, one thing remained constant. No one actually knew the full truth about what was happening behind closed doors. As part one closes, the situation stands at a crossroads. Rogan's comments have peeled back the curtain on a story that's equal parts tragedy, ambition, and perception. Erika Kirk stands silent but powerful. Her leadership questioned, but her presence undeniable. The Kirk family grieves quietly, unsure whether to defend or distance themselves. And Rogan, the ever-curious outsider, has once again proven his ability to turn a single question into a national conversation. The world is watching, waiting for answers, and the next chapter promises to dig even deeper into the delicate line between legacy and control. By the time the dust from Joe Rogan's podcast had settled, the story had already taken on a life of its own. News outlets across the spectrum were running segments about the Rogan-Kirk controversy, while online commentators picked apart every word he said as if decoding a secret message. What began as a few cautious questions about grief, leadership, and legacy had now turned into a storm of speculation. For Erika Kirk, the widow suddenly thrust into the role of both leader and target. The scrutiny was unrelenting. Behind the scenes, things were far more complicated than the headlines made them seem. According to people close to the situation, tensions had been simmering between Erika and certain members of the Kirk family long before Rogan ever mentioned her name. Charlie's passing had left a massive vacuum emotionally, personally, and organizationally. Erika was not just managing her grief, She was managing a movement that had grown far beyond one person. To those outside the circle, her taking control looked swift and decisive. But to those within it, it looked like a takeover. It looked like a takeover. Joe Rogan's commentary only poured gasoline on an already smoldering fire. He didn't create the conflict, one insider later said. He just made it impossible to ignore. Suddenly, every meeting, every appearance, every social post by Erika was analyzed through the lens of suspicion. Supporters claimed she was simply carrying out her late husband's mission. Detractors argued she was rewriting history to place herself at the center of it. The Kirk family, meanwhile, remained divided in silence. Some relatives admired Erika's resolve. They said she was doing what Charlie would have wanted, keeping his work alive. Others felt she was building something different entirely. Something that had less to do with honoring Charlie and more to do with cementing her own influence. The family's internal conversations reportedly became strained. What used to be moments of shared grief turned into quiet tension, unspoken resentment filling every pause. Meanwhile, Rogan doubled down on his remarks during another podcast episode, clarifying that he wasn't accusing anyone of wrongdoing but urging transparency. When things get too quiet around stories like this, he said, that's usually when something's being buried. The comment hit like a hammer. It implied secrecy, and secrecy breeds speculation. Within hours, hundreds of YouTube videos surfaced with titles asking what Erika Kirk was hiding. Most were clickbait, but the damage was done. The narrative had slipped out of her hands. Through it all, Erika kept her composure. Publicly, she maintained focus on her work, hosting events, giving speeches, and engaging with supporters. Her tone was professional, her posture unwavering. Yet those who knew her best said the toll was beginning to show. She's exhausted, one friend admitted. She's trying to grieve, lead, and defend herself all at the same time. It's too much for one person. As weeks passed, the public's curiosity began to shift into deeper intrigue. Whispers circulated about the direction Erika was taking the organization. Some of Charlie's longtime colleagues left quietly, citing creative differences. Others stayed, saying the transition was difficult but necessary. Still, the optics were hard to ignore. Erika's inner circle was changing, and Rogan's words about consolidation of power suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched to her. Critics, Rogan's audience, which thrives on debate and speculation, treated the situation like a social experiment. Some listeners admired Erika's resilience, calling her a model of strength in the face of adversity. Others saw her as a symbol of unchecked ambition. Every new development fed into one of two narratives: the grieving widow rising to honor her husband's dream, or the ambitious woman seizing an opportunity to control the empire he left behind. Meanwhile, the family dynamic continued to deteriorate. Reports surfaced that a planned joint memorial event had been canceled due to disagreements over who would speak and how Charlie's legacy would be portrayed. Erika allegedly wanted to focus on his vision and achievements, while some relatives pushed for a more personal remembrance. The split was symbolic, a family divided not by loss, but by what to do with it. Rogan's influence on the story grew as his comments were dissected by other prominent voices. Some praised him for daring to challenge the narrative. Others accused him of exploiting grief for ratings. "Joe's not the villain here," one media analyst said. "He's just the mirror." He said out loud what everyone was whispering. Still, to those at the center of the chaos, it felt less like a mirror and more like a magnifying glass. Every rumor now felt validated because Rogan had given it oxygen. Erika, for her part, began to subtly address the situation without naming Rogan directly. In one interview, she said, "When you step into leadership, you don't get to control how people perceive you. You just do what you believe is right and let time prove your intentions." It was a calm, composed statement, but it carried weight. She wasn't denying the tension. She was asserting control over it. That same composure, however, frustrated some of Charlie's closest allies. "She's too polished," one insider complained. "We need emotion, not press statements." But that was never Erika's way. Even before Charlie's death, she had been known for her poise. Now, that same discipline was being mistaken for coldness. The more she tried to lead, the more critics painted her as calculating. It was a lose-lose situation. As all of this unfolded, Rogan's platform continued to shape the narrative. His podcast wasn't just commentary anymore. It was a catalyst. Influencers started posting their own takes. Journalists wrote opinion pieces, and even political figures began weighing in. The story had escaped its original boundaries. What began as one man's commentary about authenticity had turned into a nationwide discussion about power, gender, and grief in the public eye. Through it all, one thing became increasingly clear. The story wasn't just about Joe Rogan and Erika Kirk. It was about the intersection of influence and vulnerability. Both had built their lives on public trust. Rogan through transparency, Erika through purpose. Now, both were navigating the fine line between authenticity and perception in private. Friends of Erika say she wrestled with how much of her personal life to share. Some advised her to open up, to humanize herself and reclaim the narrative. Others warned that showing vulnerability would only invite more attacks. "It's like walking through fire," one friend said. "If she stays silent, she looks guilty. If she speaks, they twist her words. There's no winning." Meanwhile, Rogan continued to move on to other topics, as he often does. But the echo of his words remained. The internet has a long memory, and his remarks had become part of a permanent digital footprint. Erika's name would now always be connected to his questions. Whether fair or not, by the end of this chapter, the situation reached an uneasy calm. The noise had quieted, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Erika's leadership remained firm, her support base loyal but watchful. The Kirk family's unity was fractured but not broken. And Joe Rogan, the man who unintentionally ignited the storm, had once again proven that in today's world, one conversation can rewrite an entire narrative. As the curtain closes on this part of the story, the question remains, will the Kirk legacy survive the scrutiny? Or will Rogan's words mark the beginning of a transformation no one can control? By the time the controversy reached its third week, the world had turned Erika Kirk's story into a full-blown cultural case study. News anchors, podcasts, and analysts were still dissecting Joe Rogan's remarks. And social media had built an entire mythology around what had really happened behind the scenes. Yet for those closest to the situation, it was no longer about headlines. It was about survival. Inside the walls of the organization Charlie Kirk had built, the atmosphere was uneasy. The team had learned to function under pressure, but this was different. Every public statement, every event, every word Erika said was being measured against Rogan's comments. "It feels like walking on glass," one employee allegedly told a friend. "Even when we do good work, people twist it into something else." The foundation's donors were still loyal, but questions were being asked quietly in closed rooms. Erika's leadership wasn't just a job anymore, it was a test of character. Erika, meanwhile, had entered a new phase of control. Gone was the shocked widow who had once avoided the spotlight. Now, she was deliberate, confident, and fiercely focused. Her social media posts reflected a balance of strength and serenity, carefully curated but undeniably powerful. Every caption, every appearance, every interview seemed to carry a message. She was not backing down. "When people talk about you, it's because you're doing something worth noticing," she said in one recent appearance. "I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here to lead." Those words set off another wave of interpretation. To supporters, she sounded like a woman reclaiming her destiny. To critics, she sounded like someone refusing accountability. The truth probably lived somewhere between the two. What was clear was that Erika had learned to turn criticism into momentum. She no longer reacted to Rogan's questions. She used them. Every time her name trended, she seized the opportunity to remind people of Charlie's mission, to frame herself as the steward of something larger than herself. Meanwhile, Rogan had moved on to other subjects on his show. But his earlier statements continued to ripple. Fans would still bring up the Kirk situation in comment sections and Reddit threads, keeping the speculation alive. Some insisted Rogan had called it from day one, while others believed he'd misread the entire situation. It didn't matter. In the world of public perception, the first impression often becomes the final one. And Rogan's take had already shaped how millions viewed Erika's every move. Behind the scenes, friends said she had found a way to channel the chaos into purpose. Her close circle described her as someone who understood that silence could be strategic. She's learned that saying less makes people listen more. One insider revealed, "She lets the noise burn itself out." That strategy was beginning to work. Slowly, public attention started shifting from the controversy itself to the outcomes of her leadership. Under her direction, the organization had launched new initiatives, increased its reach, and gained fresh allies. For all the talk of instability, Erika had stabilized the brand, and that fact spoke louder than any rumor. Still, the relationship between her and Charlie's family remained complicated. They appeared together at select events, smiling for cameras, but rarely sharing private words. Some observers noticed how their interactions had become formal, polite, almost rehearsed. Others believed they had reached a quiet understanding that they didn't have to see eye to honor Charlie's memory. Whether forgiveness or fatigue had created that truce, only they knew. But publicly, it gave the impression of unity, and that was enough to steady the ship in an unexpected turn. A few weeks later, Rogan addressed the issue again, but briefly, almost as a footnote. When a guest brought up the controversy, Rogan shrugged and said, "Hey, she's doing right by the people who believed in him. That's what matters. I don't have anything against her. I just ask questions." It was a short, almost casual remark, but it carried weight. For some, it felt like a quiet acknowledgement that the story had run its course. For others, it was a reminder that once Rogan puts a spotlight on you, it never fully goes away. Erika's team handled it perfectly. Instead of reacting, they leaned into the narrative of closure. "We respect everyone's opinions," one spokesperson said. "But our focus is on continuing Charlie's work with integrity and strength." That statement, simple as it was, shifted the tone entirely. The story began to fade from gossip to history. What stood out most in the aftermath wasn't the scandal. It was how Erika had survived it. In an age where public figures often crumble under backlash, she had stood her ground. Whether you loved her or questioned her motives, you had to admit one thing: she didn't break. She took one of the hardest personal and professional storms imaginable and turned it into momentum. Her critics didn't vanish, but they became quieter. Her supporters didn't just defend her, they multiplied. For Rogan, the saga reinforced his role as the cultural catalyst he's always been. He didn't need to win the debate. He had sparked it. His listeners didn't tune in for final answers, they tuned in for the conversation. And in that sense, both he and Erika got what they wanted: attention, dialogue, and relevance. In the grander picture, the episode revealed something deeper about the intersection of grief, power, and public life. It showed how society loves to build heroes, but loves even more to question them. It showed how fame magnifies not just achievements, but insecurities. And how every leader, especially a woman leading through loss, is forced to prove herself twice, first to her supporters, then to her doubters. By the time the storm passed, Erika Kirk's image had changed. She was no longer simply Charlie's widow. She was a brand, a symbol, a force unto herself. For better or worse, Joe Rogan's questions had accelerated that transformation. He had framed her as a mystery. She had rewritten herself as a mission. And while the internet eventually moved on to new scandals, the echoes of their intersection remained two strong voices that collided for a moment and changed the narrative around power, authenticity, and resilience. In the end, there were no clear winners, no definitive conclusions. Rogan continued to host his show, unfiltered and unapologetic. Erika continued to lead, calm and composed. The Kirk family continued to heal in private. And the world, as it always does, kept speculating. But one truth lingered beyond all the noise. In a culture obsessed with transparency, some stories are too layered to ever be fully understood. What began as controversy had evolved into something more complex: meditation on control. perception, and the cost of living under the microscope. Erika Kirk hadn't asked to become a headline. But when she did, she refused to let anyone else write her ending. She turned criticism into clarity, chaos into composure, and heartbreak into drive. And while Joe Rogan's words had started the fire, it was Erika's unflinching resolve that ultimately controlled how brightly it burned. The conversation Joe Rogan sparked, and Erika Kirk survived, isn't just another round of celebrity gossip, it's a case study in how public figures face storms that never stop. When Rogan questioned, the world speculated. When Erika stayed silent, the silence became the story. But in the end, she proved something powerful. Control isn't about silencing voices, it's about deciding what defines you. Her journey shows that in a culture addicted to controversy, resilience is the rarest form of rebellion. Maybe that's the real lesson here, not about fame or politics, but about endurance. Every public figure, every leader, every ordinary person who's ever had their character questioned knows that the hardest fight isn't with critics, it's with perception. Erika's refusal to crumble under scrutiny became its own kind of statement. And Rogan's willingness to ask the uncomfortable questions reminded everyone why dialogue still matters, even when it burns. If this story made you look twice at how easily narratives can twist, don't let it end here. Share it, debate it, learn from it. Ask yourself how you'd respond if the spotlight suddenly turned your life into a headline. Because whether you're a podcaster, a public leader, or someone just trying to hold on to your truth, one rule always applies. The only voice that defines you is your own. And when the noise fades, that's the story people remember.